Our next presenter is Regan. Regan, I know, has been doing her research with Dr. Epp and Dr. Caldwell at the University of Guelph. And Regan's topic is Municipal Agri-Food Systems Planning Capacity Lessons Learned from Across Ontario. So without any further ado, Regan.
Thank you, Pam. So as Pam had mentioned, I'm a PhD student at the University of Guelph, working with Dr. Wayne Caldwell and Dr. Sarah Epp, and I'm very fortunate to be working with the two of them. They're very supportive. Definitely do not feel like I'm a research assistant all the time. I've been given a lot of autonomy to lead and take co-ownership over this research, so very thankful for that opportunity. So in my presentation today, I'll be talking about a research project that is a research grant through the alliance between the University of Guelph and the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Agribusiness, and it is also part of my PhD dissertation. So I'll be talking about the research context, kind of why we wanted to do this research, the project overview, including kind of research methods, some of our results, and lessons learned. So I don't want to dwell on this too long, but I do think we have a pretty good understanding that agri-food systems or food systems are fairly vulnerable as they are right now. A lot of thought needs to go into how to safeguard our food systems and how to strengthen them. And we're very fortunate in Ontario, in Canada, to have a very strong agri-food system. In Ontario specifically, we have some of the best farmland in Canada, and we have 25.5% of the farms. We have over 750,000 people who are employed in the agri-food sector, producing over 200 commodities, and that's very significant in comparison to the other provinces. And we have 19.6 billion in agri-food exports, and that's a bit dated at this point. I think we're up to 26 billion. And at the same time, and I should mention just on this last slide, some of our best farmland is in southern Ontario. In fact, our best farmland is in southern Ontario, and that's where we're experiencing growth pressures as well. So this very much relates to experiencing farmland loss, and I'm sure we've all heard the 319 acres of farmland being lost every day. And there's discussions around maybe errors in that data, but we do have a lot of different data sources that are all telling us the same message. Whether it's this exact number or not, we know that farmland is being lost, and it's being lost at an accelerated rate. And in Ontario, we also have a planning system where municipalities are the most local level of government, and they play an important role in facilitating and supporting agri-food systems change. So municipalities are responsible for implementing land use policies, coordinating environmental stewardship efforts, and economic development initiatives. So while this is a planning conference and a planning topic, recognizing that it goes beyond maybe what we are typically conceptualizing as land use planning, and there's a lot of partnerships that go into planning as well. Well, this one has some font changes, but I did also want to just highlight some of the recent changes that impact agri-food systems. So in the PPS 2024, there's a number of changes beyond this one that I've pulled out. So thinking about settlement area boundary expansions and those policies changing, that impacts agriculture. This one specifically requires that planning authorities use an agricultural systems approach across Ontario. So that is a change. So municipalities need to be ready or have resources to be implementing this. It is now required across the province. And then I also wanted to highlight some of the changes through Bill 23 and Bill 185, which changed the role of some upper tier municipalities in terms of their planning authority and the impact that has for lower tiers in those geographies. And I'll come back to this with some of our data. And just to highlight that it's not just us as researchers or as planners who think that we have a role to play or that municipalities have a role to play in agriculture. This is a news article that came from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, the largest farm organization in the province, who is speaking about the important role that municipalities play in supporting agriculture and farmers. And that's very much the same as our research premise. So we had done a pilot of this project in 2020, looking at a smaller subset of municipalities. And it's really based on this premise that a thriving agricultural industry depends on the knowledge and support provided by municipal governments. So related to that, we have 4 different research questions. What role do municipalities play in agri-food systems planning? Are municipalities well positioned to carry out those roles? what factors contribute to municipal capacity for agri-food systems planning, and what opportunities are available to help municipal planning departments build capacity in supporting sustainable and resilient local and regional agri-food systems. To answer those questions, we had 3 different primary data collection methods. We had a survey that was sent to elected officials, a survey that was sent to the most senior planner or similar at municipalities. Our research did include all 444 municipalities in Ontario, so there isn't always a planner on staff, so doing our best to reach whoever was kind of responsible for coordinating or facilitating planning at the municipality, as well as a semi-structured interview with a member of the planning department. And I will also mention, so that last research method was only for upper and single-tier municipalities. When we had started this project, we had planned to include upper tier and single tier municipalities only, with the idea being that regions provide a lot of capacity around agri-food systems planning. We did have a lot of interest from lower tiers, and so we ended up including them in the survey data collection. And with recent changes to upper tier authority around planning, I think it's a really good thing we have data on that. So in terms of participation, we had great participation right across the province. We had 290 municipalities, so just over here, participate in one way or another. This is a variety of different ways to look at how we can break that down, because we did have 3 different research methods. So they didn't all 290 didn't participate in all 3 research methods, but we do have a data point for 290 municipalities. This is just a visual representation of our survey results. So this is both the planners and elected officials survey results. You can see really good geographic coverage right across the province. And then for our interviews, a little bit less coverage. There was only 70-some interviews conducted, but still really good geographic spread. So getting into some of our results, this was a question: how frequently does the planning department or similar deal with agriculture and agri-food related issues? And you can see there is some people saying on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, a few times a year, almost never. And this is really to do with the geographies of Ontario. As I had mentioned, our best agricultural land is often in the southwest. We do have agriculture right across the province, but it makes sense that those municipalities would be dealing with agriculture on a less frequent basis. This is also interesting to think about in the context of all municipalities being required to have an agricultural systems approach. So if you're not familiar with dealing with agriculture, you're at the almost never. What does that then mean to be thinking about an agricultural systems approach? We had also asked about a variety of different agricultural land use policies. One of them was the agricultural systems approach. And for this, we have 149 respondents from Southern and Northern Ontario, telling us whether they have expertise on staff, some knowledge on staff, or no knowledge on staff. And I think what's interesting here is on the left, you can see that Southern Ontario are the planners who are responding that they have expertise on staff. And that's likely a result of the Greater Golden Horseshoe and the agricultural systems approach already being required in that geography. If you think outside of that area, there is less familiarity, and that would be some of the single and lower tiers. In that middle category of we have some knowledge of this on staff, and then the northern municipalities who have no knowledge of this on staff. So we had also asked, how would you rate your municipality's capacity to respond to and support the agri-food system? Overwhelmingly, planners responded that they either have limited or some capacity, with very few, only 15% of the planners responding to our survey saying that they felt they had adequate capacity. And we can get into that a little bit more. I've included this just because it looks specifically at Southern Ontario, and this relates to those upper tiers who have changed planning authority. And upper tiers were at a statistically significantly reporting more capacity than lower and single tiers. And I think that is just really important for us to keep in mind as planners, as a profession, moving forward. If upper tiers are no longer providing that capacity around agri-food systems, how do we prepare or provide resources to our single and lower tiers, specifically our lower tiers who have now changed planning authority or no longer have that support from the region that they maybe once had? So getting into some more of our findings. So capacity comes from more than staff resources. So it's more than just how many people do you have in your planning department. Capacity is about a lot of other things. So it's about the enabling environment, and this includes things like the existing agricultural land base, agri-food system stakeholders and organizations, political will, the provincial planning framework, conceptualizations of what agri-food systems are and what is included, and then planning education. There's also the piece that is organizational structure, and this really speaks to that staffing resource levels. So staffing and budgetary resources, agri-food systems knowledge and expertise. So whether or not your staff have actually had training or experience related to agri-food systems in the past, facilitation and collaboration, and a commitment to supporting local and regional agri-food systems. And there's also a piece of capacity that is around agri-food systems planning processes. So this would be the ability to comprehend local and regional agri-food systems challenges and needs, the ability to make informed decisions about how to support and respond, and develop and implement effective programs, policies, and plans. So there's multiple pieces that feed into capacity, and there's multiple ways to increase your capacity or enhance your capacity related to agri-food systems planning. So I have a couple examples that have come from our interviews with planners. The first is from Greater Sudbury. So in Greater Sudbury, they have a food policy council, and they have multiple staff, municipal staff, who sit on the food policy council as staff resources. And that's just a really excellent way to help and provide a network or a partnership between an existing agri-food system organization, leveraging that partnership and providing staff resources to help support their important work. On the right side is the example from Huron County, where there's an economic development and planning liaison staff who is responsible for coordinating that really important connection that happens between economic development and planning, making sure that if someone comes into the municipality, everyone is kind of getting looped into the conversation from the get-go versus having disjointed conversations or being told two different things by different staff groups at the municipality. We also looked at the different strategies and approaches that municipalities are using, and they are very diverse across the province. There's a lot of flexibility around agri-food systems planning and what municipalities choose to pursue. So there is the regulatory roles, and these relate more to what we would conceptualize as core land use planning, so official plans and zoning bylaws, thinking about permitted uses, growth management, settlement boundary policies, minimum distance separation, agricultural impact assessments, those sorts of things. But there's also non-regulatory roles that municipalities are playing, and these include things like setting up or supporting the Agricultural Advisory Committee, alternative land use services, so the ALS program, water quality programs. These are often offered in partnership with conservation authorities, so providing financial support and incentives for farmers for water quality improvement initiatives, and then educational and local and food and farmers markets, so that promoting the local agri-food sector type initiatives. And then the last one here is partnerships and network building. So thinking about who those stakeholders are in your municipality, local federations of agriculture, farmer organizations, commodity organizations, food policy councils, conservation authorities, the Ontario Farmland Trust, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of different ways that municipalities are involved, and these all feed into capacity around supporting the agri-food sector. So this is just some data from our survey. So this was asking municipalities which initiatives they already had. And the most common one was economic development related initiatives, followed by buy local programs, water quality programs, agri-food tourism and agritourism and food and farm tours, and climate change strategies. But some of these are newer initiatives, and they're growing, and lots of municipalities have these in progress. They just aren't in place at this time. And then again, to highlight some examples from municipalities in Ontario, Ottawa's Smart Farm. So this is a partnership between the City of Ottawa and Invest Ottawa. And this is a place to test new agricultural technologies, to demonstrate them to farmers, and to collect data as well. There's a partnership with the University of Ottawa in terms of collecting data and publishing on these new technologies that are being tested. And it's a nice way for farmers to see what this technology looks like on the farm, get out, have a conversation with someone, and encourage the adoption of different technologies. And then on the right-hand side is Experimental Acres. And this came out of the Guelph Wellington Our Food Future initiative in 2022. There's 3 counties, as far as I know, that are involved. So it's Wellington, Grey, and Dufferin. And similar to the water quality programs that municipalities offer in a partnership with conservation authorities, this provides small grants to farmers for trying out different regenerative agriculture practices on their farms. So in terms of lessons learned, the role of municipalities is really important. Municipalities across Ontario are supporting local and regional agri-food systems in multiple and diverse ways. Capacity really does matter and dictates the ability of a municipality to be engaged. So capacity is complex. It includes factors such as department resources and characteristics, relationships with other municipal departments, relationships with external actors, and commitment to local and regional agri-food systems. I also want to emphasize here that our research shows us that single and lower tier municipalities report lower levels of capacity to plan for agri-food systems. So again, thinking about that going forward, where do we need to dedicate resources? And we do know that additional resources are needed across the board. This includes training opportunities, workshops, tools and guidelines, and financial and staff support. Municipal staff aren't alone. We encourage staff to work together with other departments and then as well with other organizations in the Ministry of Agriculture in terms of reaching out when you need support, when you have questions. There's knowledge, we have knowledge collectively on this topic. We just need to work together on it. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. If you'd like to learn more about our research, the QR code will bring you to Wayne Caldwell's website. I'm also you've been picked on a lot, Wayne, but I am gonna call you up for the questions. I think there's a few people in the audience who came for maybe your insights on this topic as well.
And again, I'd ask if you have questions just to use the microphone.
Okay. Yeah, sounds
Okay. Hi. You talked about the agricultural systems planning, and I'm wondering if there's any educational opportunities for people who need to understand fully that initiative and how to introduce it to their municipality.
That's a really good question. There's a few organizations. So the Ontario Farmland Trust offers some training related to that. I would also say that the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Agribusiness has resources on their website that you could check out. I would also encourage you to email staff and just ask for a conversation. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be a formalized like conference or talk that you go to, or maybe just an informal conversation would be really helpful to kind of get those foundational, talk it through. What does this look like? Where do we start? Those types of questions. I don't know if you have.
I would just add, I think there's a need, and I think it's something that will occur over time. We have another project that's looking at ag housing as an example, and agri-systems planning as part of that. I would see coming out of that perhaps recommendations which would encourage that to occur. At what level it occurs at is still a fair question to ask. We do have lots of expertise though across the province, with some jurisdictions having been more involved than others, and we can also look to those folks for insight.
I'll just also add, this past winter, there was a course that was offered at the University of Guelph with Dr. Sarah Epp in the Ontario Farmland Trust. And coming out of that class was a toolkit for municipalities related to agricultural land use planning. That is not published online that I know of, but if you send me an email, I can get that to you. And there is a really nice spreadsheet of resources and different links to check out in terms of different networks that exist.
Thank you for your time and the excellent presentation. Just if you may build on that question, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture and OMAFA do have a community of practice based on agricultural topics where they do discuss what's happening across the province at municipal level to address these topics in agricultural system planning. So I think you can register for that through OFA's website.
Thanks, Melanie. That is a really important one. And there is, I want to say, meetings maybe every 2 or a talk every 2 months or so. And everything, there is a resource library online of all the past talks that have been recorded.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Just full disclosure, I work for the City of Toronto, but I also own part of my family farm in rural Hamilton. So I noticed Toronto didn't respond to your survey. I'm not totally surprised. My question was, though, what do you have in terms of, from the very urban municipalities, did you get any responses about what any policies that are under development might look like? I would imagine they would have to focus more on the distribution side of the system, not the growing side or the land-based side, but I'm just curious. And we at Toronto and other places will have to start turning our minds to that. So what did you hear?
Yeah, I would say similar to what you've just said, the more urban municipalities did talk about the agri-food network and the different businesses that exist in their municipalities in terms of providing different processing or distribution related to the agri-food sector. We did hear a bit from urban municipalities also in terms of thinking about community gardens and helping community garden groups site new garden spaces, thinking about allowing agriculture or the growing of food on municipally owned land was another thing that often came up. Municipalities leasing vacant land to farmers in the interim also came up as part of that discussion. So there is maybe more grassroots type local food production that is still important in terms of growing people's knowledge around food systems, how food is produced, thinking and talking about the production of food in urban contexts strengthens the system as a whole, I think.
Regan, there's a question from online. It is, how do we build public support for expanding municipal agri-food capacity? And this question comes at a time when certain councils may not be influenced by vested interests wanting to develop on farmland.
That's a really interesting question. How many folks here would say that within your community you've witnessed some loss of support for protecting farmland and the whole overall ag system from your elected officials? I'm seeing a few hands go up, maybe more than a few hands going up, and I think it's a function of our times. It's perhaps a function of all of the, from a certain perspective, perhaps all of the focus that's been brought to housing as an important commodity, which it is, absolutely. But let's not forget about agriculture as well. And I think there's an educational process that we as planners have to convey to our elected officials and to the public more generally how important agriculture is, both to the provincial economy. I also like to ask folks, how many people here like to eat? It is a priority.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I was wondering if you have any insights, I guess, on the role, or what you see as the role of planners in the private sector in protecting agricultural land and things we need to be thinking about.
I said to Regan I was going to give her the hard questions and I would take the easy ones. I'm not sure this is an easy one. I think there's two or three things that go through my mind, one of which is we're all subject to the same code of ethics, right? We all have the same underlying philosophies as professional planners. And I think it speaks to the importance of recognizing that agriculture is a priority, and whether you're doing public planning or private planning is to work with that, right? To make sure that we do our best in whatever context we're working within to protect agricultural land, to ensure that the value of it is promoted. And it's a recognition that there will be times where there is conflict between development and agriculture. And with the population forecasts in the province, that will continue to be an ongoing dialogue for our profession. I'm not sure if I've asked the question or I've answered the question, but rather to say that those are some of the realities, and I think it's collective upon all of us to think about that.
I would maybe to also add that what happens in urban areas is equally important to what happens in rural areas. So growing up in and intensifying is really important to farmland protection. And so any involvement that you have in projects that are looking at infill or increased density are really important.
Hi. I guess just to take this opportunity too with people in the room that may have an interest in this topic. So sorry, Regan, but you were involved with this as well. So coming up October 23rd and 24th in Renfrew County in the city of Pembroke, there's Growing Together, which is a joint OMAFA and County of Renfrew initiative. It is, OMAFA does travel around the province every year, and it's the Municipal Agriculture, Economic Development and Planning Forum. So it brings together planning and economic developers. So if anybody has an interest here, it really, it'd be a good forum for discussion and carrying on. And Regan was helpful as well with part of the back planning of that as well.
And I will also, if anyone wants to remember, be sent the link to register for that. Again, if you email me, I will send you the information for that conference.
Hi, thanks guys, that was great. I will just plug, I love the response you gave, Wayne, but to the question you had, I think I'm with OMAFA, and the AIA guidance, the Agricultural Impact Assessment guidance, provides some really great ways to build compatibility between ag and non-ag uses. So that's a really great starting point, even if you're not doing an AIA. And then just to plug, we do have a session later today that we're going to talk about ag systems. So I was going to grab you, but I'll just let everyone know that. So among other things. So just thought it was a good opportunity to mention.
What time is it at?
3:30 in the next room over. Yeah.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, guys.
Hi, Regan. Hi, Wayne. Gabriel Clark, Municipality of Chatham-Kent. Just wondering if you have any insights in this research or other research that you may have conducted over the years in terms of disruptive forces, forces that are, potentially external to a municipality's control that would impact local agri-food systems. And I'm thinking specifically of two sort of emerging trends in our area. One is the greenhouse industry expansion. That is, by all accounts, projected to increase in southwestern Ontario quite dramatically. The impact that would have on, land economics and things like that. And then the second is what seems to be a growing influx of private equity and private investment in, buying up large amounts of agricultural land and then renting those lands back to, say, multi-generational farmers so that they can get, essentially like a one-time payout, but then they lose ownership of their land. That land becomes, property of an investment firm, and then the farming community has to then rent their land back from that investment firm over a long time. Just curious to know if you guys have any insights as to how those may impact agri-food systems at the local level going forward.
I think you've got more years of research.
This is the advantage of two of us here. Neither of us could take the question. That's a really hard question that I don't know that I have an answer to, in particular the last part with the ownership. And I'm not sure, folks in the audience, how many people would say I'm reasonably familiar with the value of farmland out there today? Right, but it is astronomical in terms of having gone through the roof. In Huron County, we're seeing land values at 30, 40. I was speaking to someone saying that she heard a rumor of land selling at $50,000 an acre, which is a 100-acre farm that 10 or 20 years ago might have been worth $250,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 is now worth $5 or $6 million. So folks are looking at those as investment opportunities, as you're saying, as opposed to necessarily looking at it and the speculative value, not speculative value for urban development purposes, but speculative value for agricultural purposes. Acquiring this land and but it's something that I think it's fair to say within the planning system, we don't have means to control that in any way. And maybe if anyone has any thoughts on this to the contrary, please shout them out. But difficult to control that. But what I think you're speaking to then is how do we deal with the fallout from that, right? Because it probably means, of course, it means less local ownership. It means less local control of the agricultural land base. People renting it, and is the reinvestment happening back into the farm as it would if it was owned by that person in terms of tile drainage or just diversity on the farm, forest practices on those parts of the farm, tendencies to want to get rid of the forested landscape on a farm because it's worth so much from an agricultural perspective. And I was speaking to someone recently on that too. So I mean, we can look at it. I mean, there's layers of that we can work at, like the forest conservation bylaws is an example which deals with one element of that, trying to make sure that we have the best practices possible in terms of on-farm management, the best practices to advocate those. But it's a tricky thing to respond to. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Regan. If anyone in the audience has anything to shout out related to that question, I'd be really interested in hearing too. Someone at the back has a thought?
Just a thought. I mean, to me, it would start with information and data and finding out like how much land is being sold to other farmers versus to non-farmers, for example, as opposed to start, and understanding what that looks like could, increase public and others' interest in the topic, because I think it's
And I'll just
a huge issue.
I'll just repeat that for folks online probably not hearing, but the comment was collecting data that gives us a better insight into how much of this is being transitioned into other ownership. I think that captures the key part of it. Regan, I think you were wanting to jump in.
Yeah, I was also just going to add that some of the clean water projects or the experimental acres or ALICE program, in cases where farmers aren't owning the land and maybe aren't encouraged to invest back into the land in terms of more stewardship or environmental practices, some of those programs that share the burden of the cost with farmers, I do think helps to encourage those practices to still happen. It doesn't address the root cause, but maybe makes the best of the situation as it's kind of currently playing out.
The green belt is still an important tool for ensuring farmland is sold to farmers. I just want to say that.
Great comment. And if I could just say a quick comment too, you mentioned greenhouses and the like, and do we have anyone here from Essex or Kingsville, that part of the province? I was recently in the Little Leamington area, and it's incredible for folks that haven't experienced that, what's occurring with the greenhouse construction. And we have to look at all of the positives connected to that, but realize there's a whole series of planning outcomes that we also need to be thinking about in terms of what that means for the local environment, what that means for local employment, what that means for all of the housing that's required connected to that as well. Great question. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Regan and Wayne. Denise here from Huron. I guess I'm curious to know, in terms of future research, if anyone maybe on your team is going to be looking at what we can only imagine is going to be a swath of settlement area expansions with the upcoming PPS. I think it's a concern, and I think what's difficult for any one of us at a municipal level is that while we can convey to our own political officials what we see as potentially negative impacts of the expanding settlement areas, it's very difficult to paint that cumulative picture across the province. OFA has been doing a great job, but just wondering, is there a role for OMAFA in making this information more available as to the cumulative impacts of what we're going to see across the agri-food sector if we continue on the way we're going? Is there a role for academic research, and is there possibly a way we could partner to try to get that data and effectively communicate it?
I don't think I have a good answer to that. I don't think that data currently exists, as far as I know, in terms of keeping track of cumulative impacts at this current time, let alone planned future research. I do agree it's super important and something that the University of Guelph, it would be aligned with research that is ongoing right now. But I don't know of any.
I think it would be the work that Sarah continues to do. I don't think that project's yet finished looking at farmland.
Yeah, through official plan amendments. There is a project that Wayne was previously leading, and now Dr. Sarah Epp is working on around farmland loss through official plan amendments. So trying to understand understanding that farmland is lost at different points in the planning process, and we can't always see what is based on what is happening on the ground. So sometimes a development may have approvals a decade, 2 decades before that development actually occurs. So trying to capture that in terms of farmland loss, but in terms of settlement boundary expansion specifically, I don't think there is data around that.
Yeah, and again, just noting the lack of appeal rights for anyone who is a third party, including OFA having lost appeal rights, the mechanisms for persons who don't agree with the conversion of agricultural land into urban land uses has been substantially reduced in the last 6 months.
If I could just add to your question, because I think if we look at MZOs as an example, so many of them happened that I don't know, for folks not familiar, MZOs, Minister Zoning Orders, how have we done as a province in that? And I know there's been some monitoring of that, and I think as we get into settlement boundary expansions under the new circumstances, new policy, somebody needs to be monitoring that really carefully. And I think there's a role for provincial ministries, perhaps, although that may be difficult, if I could say that, but certainly for academics or other organizations all the way from OFA through the Ontario Farmland Trust to try to be on top of that, because I think as our opportunity as planners is to influence policy, without that data, it's going to be hard. And I think it's really critical that we do, because we may see some significant losses from an agricultural perspective.
Thank you.
Great. Maybe just one last comment. It's not a question, but it's a member from a member online. They said, thank you very much, Regan and Wayne, and thank you especially for the experimental acres in County of Wellington program that you mentioned. And this person says that that program really deserves more attention. So thank you for including that. With that, I'd like to thank Dr. Caldwell and Regan for their great presentation and everyone for your wonderful questions. We do have a letter of thanks, an envelope of thanks for both Regan and Charles, so thank you for your presentations today. And I would remind everyone that on the program next is lunch upstairs with some musical entertainment.